Welcome to Athens City Council. This evening we will be meeting in council committees. The meeting will be called to order by the City Council President, who will then pass discussion over to a respective committee. The chair of the committee will introduce the discussion topics and provide an overview of the issues at hand. If needed, members of the administration will offer brief statements to provide further context. We will then welcome input from the community. Any citizens who wish to speak will be asked to state their name and address, both verbally and on the sign and sheet located at the podium. Individuals will be given one opportunity to share their thoughts, and the committee chair will have the authority to limit each speaker to 3 minutes. Once all citizens have had the opportunity to speak within the 15-minute time period allotted for total public participation on each topic, the public comment portion will be closed. Council committee members will then continue their deliberations. There may be additional questions directed to the administration during this time. When the discussion on the topic concludes, the chair will indicate whether legislation will be introduced at the next regular session of council and move on to the next item on the agenda or adjourn the committee if their work is complete. The next committee chair will then call their committee to order, proceeding in the same manner as before. Once all committees have adjourned, City Council will conclude for the evening.
Good evening and welcome to Athens City Council. Today is January 12th, 2026, and it's 7:02 p.m. and we are in committees this evening. We will have a meeting of the Planning and Development Committee first, followed by a meeting of the Finance and Personnel Committee, and then the City and Safety Services Committee, followed by the Committee of the Whole. We'll have council members who are part of the committee remain at the dais, while others assume their stance in the audience, and we'll be beginning this evening with the Planning and Development Committee meeting that's chaired by Member Alan Swank and joined by Member Megan Almeida, Member Paul Isherwood, and Member Jessica Thomas. Planning and Development, Member Swank, it's all yours.
All righty. First committee meeting of the year. Back in the old days when I coached volleyball, I always tried to schedule a team that wasn't very good the first game of the year to kind of get our confidence and figure out what we're doing. And this first item on tonight's agenda is one of those teams we should beat, a pretty easy, straightforward item. We've had a request from the folks at Uptown Realty to put a sign in the right-of-way on Elliott Street. And Ryan, if you would put up that sign or put up that picture, what we're talking, if you're on Stimson Avenue there at the gas station and make a left on Elliott or right, depending on which way you're going, and head towards campus, head towards Mill Street, this is the property we're talking about. It's 35 Elliott. As you're looking at it, just immediately to your right is the old, like a barn. It's a woodworking shop, Steve Croft's woodworking shop. So if you're coming from Mill Street in Elliott, this would be on your right. If you're coming from Stimson, or excuse me, on your left. And if you're coming from Stimson and Elliott, this would be on your right. This is cleared code. There's a very, very deep right-of-way here, way more than we normally have. And what they want to do is place a sign in the front yard about between the two doors there in the front yard. The sign will be two-sided. In other words, it will sit perpendicular to the street so that when you're coming down Elliott from Stimson, you can see the sign. And when you're coming up Elliott from Mill Street, you'll be able to see the sign. The reason this qualifies, this property from a rental standpoint is more than just this building. It includes 38 bedrooms, which are back and to the right. There's also, you see in the back, those are not housing units in the back. Those are, what do you call them? Rental units. Pretty straightforward. They're asking for the use of the right-of-way, and code has passed it to us with their approval. Mr. Mayor, anything you would like to add to that?
No, you summed it up well.
Okay, very good. Any members of our speaking audience today? Members of the committee.
I would say, as I mentioned, I was emailing with Member Swank, and the imagery in the application suggests that the sign is parallel to the road, but it's more perpendicular, which makes, so if everyone's looking at this in the public record, it actually makes a lot more sense, because the back of the sign won't be facing the building, it'll be facing the road. And as there's plenty of room in that offset to allow it to sit, and I think will add to the streetscape very nicely.
Yeah, it's a very nice looking sign too.
Yeah.
Any other comments from members of the committee? At this point in time, I'd entertain a motion to move this to first reading at our next meeting.
Second.
Can we get a first?
Oh.
Okay. I just heard 2 seconds.
Have it.
All right.
I'll second.
Okay, all in favor of moving this to our next regular session of council, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All righty, that may be ordinance number 0126. I think this is the first one coming forward, or whatever you assign it.
Maybe.
Maybe, all right. Second item on the agenda involves a proposed donation of 3 parcels of land up on Joneswood. For those of you who may not be familiar with the name of the street, Joneswood is the place where the house fell off the cliff. To the, I guess would be the east of Joneswood would be Columbia, and to the west of Joneswood would be down over the hill, Columbus Road. The current owners of the property are willing to donate 3 parcels of land with, according to the auditor's website, appraised value of about $42,000. If there is a donation, if we do decide to do this, it will have to be reappraised again, but there is no housing unit on the property. We'll donate it to the city, and the city in turn would like to make that available for sale, but that's on down the road. The first step in this is for us to accept the donation of this property. Mr. Mayor, anything you'd like to add to that, please?
Just that when we did repair Joneswood, which we had to get it back open again, we ended up having to put some significant retaining wall infrastructure along there. So part of this, in accepting this particular parcel, will help us with expanding the right-of-way on that parcel. And as Councilmember Swank indicated, this parcel, well, parcels, plural, do extend all the way down to Columbus Road, which, again, we would look at possibly either retaining the parcels as they exist or maybe doing some lot splitting of the parcels, in particular to retain that right-of-way to maintain the retaining wall and for Joneswood, but also possibly rethinking a parcel that is on Columbus Road, which we all know Columbus Road has become a ever-growing business corridor. So, and one of the gateways into the city. So it gives us flexibility in how we move forward with this particular parcel. But it's coming to us, it's being gifted, if accepted, council approves, through Fannie Mae. Fannie Mae has gotten to the point where they would just soon donate it to the city as opposed to sitting around trying to get someone to purchase it or whatever for that property. So,
Thank you.
you're welcome.
Any members of the community? Members of the Planning and Development Committee?
I just have a question for the mayor, and this is something I should have known. I could have looked this up. If that parcel or was split in any way on Columbus Road, what area is that zoned? Is that zoned for commercial or residential?
I'd have to go back and look, but I would imagine with those 3 parcels that they were all zoned R,
Yeah.
which is interesting. So the plan would be, again, with council's approval, because we'd have to go through a
Sure.
rezoning process if we were to want, if we did this, and that's the other thing. We may not. We may just sit there and go, look, we could certainly use it from Joneswood all the way down to Columbus Road and retain potentially a right-of-way there if, again, I'm just throwing this out there, if we were to decide maybe we need to put another catch basin and a storm drain that would run all the way down to Columbus Road. But again, there's flexibility with this parcel. So at this point, again, to my point about possibly lot splitting, that's a conversation yet to be had. The first step is for council to authorize us being in receivership of this property.
Other questions? Again, I would entertain a motion to advance this to regular session next week.
So moved.
Can I have a second? Second, okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And opposed? All righty. Well, that takes care of planning and development. I guess finance and personnel are up next.
Thank you, Member Swank. Planning and Development is adjourned at 7:10. We have Finance and Personnel, and that's chaired by Member Jessica Thomas, joined by Beth Clodfelder, John Stazer, and Michael Wood.
All yours.
Member Thomas, you have the floor. We will begin 7:10 p.m.
Thank you. Let's see, we have a few items on the agenda tonight, and there are going to be a couple changes to part of these, so as we get to those, I'll fill everybody in. The first item on the agenda is the public depositories. This happens every 5 years, according to ORC, and this is where the city and the city treasurer take applications from public institutions, banks, and savings and loans as to where we can invest and store our interim money. So basically, as we have money available to invest or to have set aside that we know we're not going to need immediately, this dictates the process by which that occurs. Switch over here. So, as I said, this is going to happen every 5 years. The process is that banks will have to apply. They'll apply to the treasurer's office. He will go through whatever the steps are, which I'm sure he'll fill us in on all of that, and then dictate those. This all has to be done by March 1st because it has to be done in the wonderful words of ORC, the third Thursday before the end of the previous 5-year term. So that is why we are up against the date of March 1st, which means that as we get to these next two ordinances, next week I will ask for a suspension on both of them. That's a basic overview. I'm sure there'll be questions, and I will let the treasurer answer more of those as we get to each ordinance. The first ordinance is the resolutions, not ordinances, but a resolution estimating the amount of interim monies for deposit in public depositories, directing the treasurer to take periodic applications and to award interim deposits as monies become available. What this does is the treasurer will estimate the amount of interim monies he expects for the next 5 years. And then he will take the applications, and then we dictate there's a maximum amount of monies that can go into each one of those institutions, which you'll see as we get to a future resolution. This will have a maximum, this will have a maximum of 35 million. It says in the ordinance I sent out 10. That just wasn't updated yet for this year. So that will be adjusted in the ordinance or the resolution that comes forward next week. Basically, these are going to be based on how they choose an institution as the highest interest that is permissible for a municipality. And that is the first one, and that will be due February 9th is when those letters will be due back to the treasurer's office. The second ordinance, as these are both have to go through, is a resolution declaring the intent of City Council to designate public depositories for the active funds of the City of Athens, the term for receiving the applications, and the time for designation, which means that we're going to declare our intent to do this. We're going to set the term for receiving applications, which will be February 1st through the 7th, and then the date of designation, which will be by March 1st. This is done, as I said, every 5 years, and is kind of a standard practice for the city. And from there, I will go to city officials, who I'm sure is going to deflect over.
Not necessarily.
No?
Several years ago, in conversations with the city treasurer and the city auditor when it comes to this topic of and us taking our reserves and investing them in financial institutions in the city of Athens and beyond. I was pretty adamant about at least one of the institutions that we work with is a minority-owned institution, financial institution. And one in particular that I had identified, which is up in Columbus, called the Delphi Bank. It is the first black-owned financial institution in Columbus, and I think one of the things that would be wonderful is honoring the comments that we heard early in our work with diversity, equity, and inclusion. Yes, I used that phrase, that acronym. In that, you know, helping some of our minority-owned businesses here in the city of Athens, that it could or would be helpful for us to also be investing in a minority-owned institution, a financial institution, and therefore possibly opening up that door for a branch office down here in Athens, which would be wonderful, quite honestly. That's not the intent, but you know, to show in good faith that we're interested in investing in rather than just the large financial institutions and whatnot, to work with an institution such as Adelphi. Not the only one in the state of Ohio, but certainly it's the closest one to the city of Athens. I did my research on that institution, and you know, they're fully backed, and now I'll turn it over to the treasurer to speak on the other points associated with this.
Nothing super exciting here. Member Thomas explained it pretty well. You know, again, the step-by-step process of this, just like she said, is we will, you know, next week, we'll ask that you just do the 2 resolutions. The first one for the interim monies. Again, that's our investment monies. The reason that number is what it is, the 35 million, is right now we have almost 31 million that's invested in different things. That number will probably just go down as the future rolls, because some of those things are, good example, $2.5 million grant that was given to the fire department for the new training center. They don't need that money right now, so I've got it invested. But as they need it, that money's gonna be gone. So, you know, our investment amount might go down, but it seems smart just to leave it at the high number. That way we have the flexibility that if money becomes available, if we would receive grants or anything that we can invest in the short term, we can do that. So that's really the first resolution, is just saying we're gonna do that. You know, we're gonna designate that amount. I'll invest the money as I always have. Next week, actually, I probably will come and give you a nice report on all the interest we accumulated in 2025 as well. So that way you'll know that. The second resolution, as she said, this is just giving me the permission to send out letters. You're gonna do the resolution. I'm then gonna send out a letter to all the banks here in Athens that want to participate, to the Adelphi Bank in Columbus. We're gonna just see, and then they'll respond back with basically their proposal. And all their proposal is they're gonna send back their, you know, where they stand, all their financials. Because one rule is, like, no bank can have more than 30. They can only hold 30% or less of what their assets are. It's not going to be a problem for hardly anybody, but that's just one of the rules that they have. I'll send that letter out. They also have to then sign our investment policy that we have. It's pretty generic. It follows right along with the state ORC, you know, as to how we invest our money and what the rules and stuff are. All the banks are pretty much up to speed on this because they work with people all the time. They'll send that back to me. We'll decide then, you know, how much we're gonna designate for each bank. In the past, it was like, you know, maybe 10 million. Chase would always get the remainder of everything, being the biggest bank, obviously, they can handle it. And then we would go from there. The very next step then would be, the last resolution is, you'll see all the banks spelled out with those numbers on them, that we would say we're designating this much to this bank, this much to this bank, this much to this bank. It's a pretty simple process, but again, with the time constraints, we just need to make sure we'll have to suspend and pass the resolution so that we can get it done. And as Member Thomas said, yeah, it has to be, it's the third Monday of the month preceding the expiration date of the previous 5-year, you know, term. So that would be, you know, if you look at the calendar, that's February 16th, because we just need to have it done by then. But pretty cut and dry, pretty simple.
All right, members of the committee, any questions?
Just a comment, I'm glad to know that we are also investing or inviting them to get investments from the local banks. Does that include the Ohio University Credit Union?
We are not allowed to work with credit unions. Yeah, that's in the ORC. We
Okay.
have to, yeah. There's certain types of banks that you're allowed to work with. Same thing with, if you talk about investments, there's certain types of investments in our investment policy that we can do and certain types that we can't do. And even now, it used to be commercial paper is something we can do to a certain percentage, but even now there's even more rules on those have to be rated a certain class, so, yeah, we pay attention to all that.
Follow-up question. If you're at liberty to say, do we ever invest in other financial institutions in Southeast Ohio, outside of Athens?
As in,
Like Vinton County Bank or anything like that?
not really. Everything we have really is pretty much, our local banks like Hocking Valley, Chase, Peoples, we work with them and use them. Don't really have anything invested outside of that otherwise. In terms of like brokerage accounts now, then we work with Red Tree Investments. They're based out of Cincinnati. Whenever it's just suggested, like as a treasurer, because again, keep in mind this is like I could have gotten kicked out a month ago, right? So as a treasurer, you really want to do when you're doing some of these investments, you want to be working with somebody that this is what they do for a living, as opposed to somebody that this is what I do for 10 hours a week, right? So we work with Red Tree Investments, and they handle a lot of our, again, like I say, when you talk about commercial paper or U.S. Treasury notes and things like that, they handle a lot of that. Now I get all the reports and I have meetings with them, but for the most part, they're really up to speed on all the laws and regulations that we need to be, in compliance with.
Okay.
Any other questions? All right. We can move on next to the next item, which is appropriations. There are 4 listed on our packets here, but 2 of these are going to be changed. So we'll start with the top 2 because they're just the most straightforward. And that is going to be the first one of an appropriation moving $12,511.84 to the general fund fire capital improvement for grant funds that were received from the state fire marshal. And basically this grant was not put into the budget because they didn't know when the funds were going to arrive. It's since arrived, and so they're moving the money around and putting that into the general fund fire line. And I guess, does anyone have any questions on that one? We can go one by one, or any other additional comments on the fire grant?
Just that it's going towards Mark's radios, which are extremely expensive. So this grant will really help with those for the fire department.
Yeah. I just realized I forgot to ask the public comment. Does anyone from the public have any questions? And anyone from the committee on that one? The next one in that line is $20,000 moving from APR income tax fund capital improvements to for pole skimmer repairs. And the notes on that one are that basically the pole skimmer has had issues for the last 2 years and has been temporary fixed a number of times, and it's really just at the point that it needs to be permanently fixed and fully addressed. And it was not put into the budget as they did not have an estimate at that time. So they'll be moving money for that and appropriating that. If anyone has any questions on that one or additional, pretty straightforward. Anyone in the audience? Anyone on the committee? All right. On the appropriations on the next 2, the one that says $214,000 from to special revenue fund and the $161 capital improvement fund there are going to be changes there. And that came in this afternoon. So those are not going to be happening from those funds. Instead, it is going to be funds moving from 101 unrestricted funds of $236,477.30, and that'll be moving to the ACIC. I'm sorry, I'm saying this wrong because you guys removed this. Let me go to the mayor. He has the most up to date, I think.
Yeah, it's in that unrestricted fund line that was described, and I'll tell you what it is. It's the Host Community Cannabis Fund, or what we're referring to as the pot. Is that we're going to take from the $237,000 and change that we received from the state for the 36% excise, share of the excise tax on recreational marijuana sales, which again is an unrestricted fund that comes back to the city. We'll take the $214,000 from that. The reason being is that the special revenue fund, in looking at the language in there, it states that it cannot be used for new construction, renovation construction, or improvements to a building, which is kind of interesting given that that fund line was created. Again, this is good because this is right in alignment with the treasurer's last comments on the city's investments. When we received the $17+ million from ACGP for the Work in Appalachia grant, which was for 5 projects, Coshocton, Somerset, 2 in Logan, and the Armory in Athens. The treasurer did the right thing, and that is invest a good portion of it or put it in an interest-bearing account at one of our financial institutions. It collectively brought in about $214,000, which, since we were the lead applicant on that grant, by the rules laid out by ODOD and the state, that we were entitled to using that almost as an administrative fee that we're collecting this revenue, but off of the interest being borne by that grant. But we can't use it for, which is unfortunate, use that for a good portion of what we yet owe as we're closing out the punch list items on the Armory itself. So instead, we'll use the Host Community Cannabis Fund to do that this year. Those funds, like I said, they are unrestricted. They would otherwise go into the general fund. The $237,000 that we received from the state, I want to say this because I want council to understand that amount is not what we are likely to see coming to the city annually from this point moving forward, because the state, while the ballot initiative was clear in that 36% of the 10% excise tax would go back to any municipality that has dispensaries that are selling recreational marijuana. We now have 3 dispensaries in the city. However, when this went into effect on January 1 of 2024, we only had 1 dispensary that was selling recreational marijuana, and then late 2024 or early 2025, a second one came online. So there was excise tax generated off of that one based on its sales. The third one just opened its doors the tail end of last year, the one that's on Stimson Avenue. So I don't think that we will see that in the tranche that we received from the state that bloom is likely not in there, but the other 2 likely so. But again, my reason for sharing that is that one of those dispensaries has been collecting for over 2 years, because it took us that long to finally get the state to start releasing the money that was entitled to.
Okay.
After my having to lobby, along with a bunch of other mayors across the state of Ohio, rather hard, because the state house, our state legislature, was actually wanting to not have that Host Community Cannabis Fund go back to municipalities, or have it happen over the course of 5 years and then it goes away. Well, that's not what the voters voted on. The voters voted on the language that was on the ballot, and which spoke to that. So yay, a win there. The governor has signed off on it, and so now that, at this point in time, the 36% of the 10% excise tax does come to host communities. It will go as it comes in. I don't know how it's going to come in, whether it's quarterly or annual or whatever, but whatever that looks like moving forward, that money, after this movement of the funds, will then just go into the general fund and help with our general fund revenue moving forward, and not have it dedicated to something in particular. But again, it's unusual to get this large amount now, unusual because of the 2-year span of time we will not be seeing as much coming into that as we see with what we just received from the state.
Okay. So instead of being from the special revenue fund, it's going to say from the 101 fund,
Yes,
pot, whatever number we're giving that.
the pot.
And then that will also change down under the inter-fund transfers. Instead of saying 214 from special revenue fund to ACIC fund, it will have from the 101 general revenue fund.
Yeah,
The capital improvement funds remain the same number?
they do.
Okay, so those will be the only changes going forward on those. Yeah. Do you have anything in addition to add on those? Covered. Does anyone from the audience have any questions? And anyone from the committee? That all makes sense, or do they have any? It got a little convoluted this afternoon. No? All right. Then that is all we have from finance.
Thank you, Member Thomas. Finance personnel is adjourned at 7:31. And next we have City and Safety Services. We'll have that committee return to the dais.
Who's on that committee?
City and Safety Services is chaired by Paul Isherwood, joined by Megan Almeida, Alan Swink, and Michael Wood. And Chair Isherwood, the floor is yours to begin City and Safety Services
Okay,
Committee.
thank you, President McCary. So we have two items on the agenda tonight. The first one is about our annual purchase of water softening salt. And I went back, this is something we do every year. And I went back and I looked, President McCary was chairing this committee this time last year. And the words that rang in my ear from that was, he had asked the City Safety Service Director if this was something we could maybe not do. And he said, that would just be a very, very bad idea. This is a sort of somewhat perfunctory because this has already been put in the budget. This is to approve, because it is more than the threshold for a single purchase requiring council authorization, so we have to do an ordinance. So this is for an amount up to $240,000 to purchase salt for our water softening. Mayor, do you have anything to add?
This is something we have to purchase every year. I have been asked, can the city just use the road salt? No, you cannot use road salt as water softening salt. Our water, as it comes out of the wells from our wellhead protection area, it is hard water, and so therefore this is something that we have to do to our water, or we'd have 24,862 angry individuals in the city of Athens with with their water.
Anyone from the community or the audience? Anyone from the committee? Member Swank?
Yeah, we do this every year. This is routine, but I'm a little concerned about the numbers. In 2024, the amount was $184,000. In 2025, it was $190,000, which is with 2.9% increase, pretty much in line with the inflation rate. What we're being asked is to go from $190,000 to $240,000, which is a 26.2% increase. That seems way out of line, and I'm not comfortable with that. So I don't know if there's an explanation as to why, but that's 5%, yeah, 26.2%. I don't see that. So I'm just curious as to why the big jump, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Mayor, do you have any?
The increase is likely just due to the market for softening salt. We see this with road salt on occasion too, to where the pricing of road salt will jump up on us to where we're getting. I remember when I first became mayor, I believe it was somewhere in the range of $80-some thousand that we were having to allocate towards road salt. Water softening salt, I've seen it fluctuate up and down as well. There have been cases where the commodity has come way down, and so we are paying less. Even if we do it collectively through the state, almost like buying road or softening salt through Costco, more buying power. I'll find out exactly what's going on. If it is market pressures to where it's not, for whatever reason, the sourcing of it, there tends to be two major places that we will get that from, Cargill and Monsanto. I'll do some homework to find out why that increase.
Yeah, I was looking back through previous years, even further than just 2024 and 25, and it's been a gradual increase, but the increase went like this, and that kind of jumps out.
Find out.
I'd be interested in what some of the other communities in southeastern Ohio are saying, Marietta, Cambridge, Lancaster, Zanesville. And we've got a chance for 3 readings, because we have enough salt to get us through till this purchase is made, I would assume.
I assume so.
Yeah, for a month or 2 or 3. Okay. Sounds good. Yeah, I'd like to, that's a big jump. That jumps out.
Okay.
Yeah, so do I have anyone a motion to advance that to full committee?
So move.
Any second?
Second.
Okay. The second issue on our agenda is the establishment of a streetlight utility. So currently, the cost to the city out of the general fund for the streetlights in the city is about $160,000 a year. There are roughly 700 AEP-owned streetlights that the city rents. The fee is a flat fee that includes the cost for both electricity and maintenance. And the city owns another 400 or so lights that the city maintains and pays for just the metered electricity. This is a proposal to take some of the pressure off the general fund, but also to shift the cost of this funding to a newly established streetlight utility, and I believe is borrowing from what many other similar municipalities do in order to cover this cost. So, Mayor, do you have anything you want to add on that?
I do. This would be an additional $2.50 to your utility bill for this, which would generate, with the accounts that we have in the city, about $167,000 a year. As was indicated, we currently rent our streetlights from AEP at $160,000 a year, which that rental fee basically comes out of the general fund as an expense. This would change things, as Councilmember Isherwood indicated. Director Stone has looked at other models in the state of Ohio. Monroe, Ohio has something very similar. It's their streetlight utility charge, which is billed monthly. Triton, Ohio also has a residential utility charge for streetlight assessments. And Barberton, Ohio also has one. Theirs is $3, but it also includes traffic signals. We own our traffic signals. They're LED, so they're low energy using. And so this would certainly be helpful. The other thing is, again, this comes out of the general fund, and the general fund, as you're all well aware, is coming from, that funding is taxpayer dollars that goes into the general fund. This, by having it as a utility, streetlight utility fund line, it would be all accounts in the city of Athens, to include Ohio University accounts, that would be paying into this particular streetlight utility fund. So this isn't anything new, when it comes to what other municipalities do, how they treat it, to offset things, but it's going to certainly reduce us drawing revenue from the general fund to create something like this.
Okay. Anyone from the community?
Mary Abel, Strathmore Boulevard. I looked at this and I understand what the mayor has said, but I think one of the things to remember is that streetlights are a safety factor for citizens within the community. And it seems to me that that is a responsibility of the city to provide that kind of safety issue. I know that $2.50 a month comes out to about $30 a year. And to people who are making a good income, that doesn't sound like very much, does it? But I want you to think about this. According to what I read in the Dispatch in the Ohio Capital Journal in December, that Ohio analysts are predicting that electric bills could increase by 1.5% to 5% starting in June. That's a pretty significant increase. Also, I think about people who are on fixed incomes. I just had a conversation with someone this week who is on a fixed income, has a very modest home, does not overheat it, but that bill for their house increased $165 this month. That's a pretty significant increase. I think if we need to have more money, then this was a good campaign issue to take into the income tax issue that will be on the ballot and let people know that this is one of the things that the city needs. And that might be a way to look at that, to accomplish that for more funding through the income tax. Now, I think people probably wonder, why are we having such an increase in utility bills, particularly electric? Well, if you've looked at things, it's because of the data centers that are coming into this state that are huge users of electricity and water. We also have an outdated grid system that has not been fixed. So I realize that the need is there, but I would encourage council to look at these other factors of ways that could do it, putting it into the income tax information that will be on the ballot. And I also realize that we can talk about aggregation, and we've talked about that many times here. But realize that many of your seniors and people on fixed incomes do not know how to do that aggregation. And you have to do it frequently. And if that is something that some of you could provide through constituent services for training for people so that they know how to do that, I think that would be a valuable thing as well. But I would just encourage you to think about those factors as we go through this. Thank you.
She can't speak.
Beth Clodfelter, South Shannon Avenue. I'm just wondering,
She can't speak.
I think you said there would be a $2.50.
Hang on,
Do you have a point of order, Mr.
Yeah, point of order, Beth, we're not allowed to speak as council members. I have a ruling today from our parliamentarian and Debbie Walker that when we enter the audience, we are still council members, and our first opportunity to speak is at first reading. Yeah, I just found this out today. I'm sorry, no offense whatsoever. Just got this from Debbie and Lisa today. But we can all speak a whole lot next Monday.
Thank you, Member Swank. Sorry, Member Clodfelter. Anyone else from the audience? I brought some of these issues to I had some of those similar concerns about folks on fixed income, and so I raised some of those concerns with Andy Stone, and was there other ways to offset this cost? Ultimately, I think the mayor would agree that the goal of this is to raise $160,000 to offset that cost of the general fund, and there's some flexibility within how we could do that. One of the things that I raised were folks who were receiving support from LIHEAP, and the response I got was that, well, the city, if an individual was in that position and they were eligible for that support, that they would be referred to HAPCAP, they would get that support, and if approved and they decide some of the subsidy will go to their city utility bill, HAPCAP sends a check to the city to offset their need, but the city is still paid for the utilities. But there is a way for individuals in those situations to get support through HAPCAP, so we would encourage people to contact HAPCAP to get that support where they're eligible to do it. But I recognize that not everybody is necessarily eligible for that. And of course, I think the point made, it's not always necessarily easy to get that support, and helping people with that is something that certainly we could look at doing. There was another issue I raised with the City Safety Service Director, was the issue of, could we look at potentially increasing the charge to commercial interests over residential to reduce that cost to households. So currently the breakdown right now of those accounts is 4,772 residential accounts, there's 597 commercial accounts and 11 industrial accounts. So I think something we might want to look at as a committee, and I'm certainly open to hearing why that's perhaps an unfair burden if you were to increase the cost to small businesses and commercial. I'm not immune to that being an issue, but if that cost was slightly higher for a business of the $30, could you reduce that overall cost to residential? I think that's something worth at least looking at. And with that, I'll see if any other members of the committee are interested in speaking. Member Wood?
Yeah, thank you for raising the point about maybe having commercial or industrial be higher. Fully agree on that. I think what Mary said speaks to me. Just not keen to do this, frankly, for all the reasons outlaid.
Member Swank?
I was hoping tonight that we would have the year-end figures from the auditor's office, but we do not. And the figures that I was looking at specifically are two. One, what our carryover from 2025 to 2026 was, and secondly, what our income tax revenue for the entire 2025 year was. We don't have those figures, and we talk about the pressure on the general fund. Without those figures, I don't know how much pressure we have. To give you an idea, in November of 2024, we had income tax at that point in time of $9.5 million. November of 2025, it was $10.1 million. And that's the latest month that we have figures for as council members that we receive every month, which was an increase of 6.6%. The other thing I looked at was income tax. The end of the year income tax 2023, we raised just over $10 million. In 2024, that went to $10.5 million. And at the current path we were on, as of the end of November this year, I'm estimating it'll be $11.2 million, which is a significant increase considering we only budgeted $10 million. That's $1.2 million above the projected budget. But again, without those concrete figures, it's really tough to talk about the true need. I'm not disputing there may be a need, but we really can't talk about the true need. In talking to people about this since we have got the information on Thursday, and I appreciate all the committee members who got the information, or the committee chairs who got the information out to the committee members well in advance of the Friday at 4 o'clock deadline. That really helps us prepare for this meeting. But I talked to a lot of people over the weekend, including a 35-minute conversation in aisle 6 at Kroger's about this. And some of the issues that people brought up were very similar to what Mary brought up. One of the things they talked about is if we begin charging for a service, which we would be doing, if we begin charging for a service that people are receiving, they're going to expect that the lights work. And when they don't work, they're going to expect that they are repaired in a reasonable amount of time. I know for a fact that we've put in some requests for some streetlight repairs that AEP owns, and it might be a month, it might be 3 months, it might never get repaired. And when you begin to charge somebody for something and they don't get it, it kind of makes people feel not too good. The second thing is, in the next month, all property owners in this town will be receiving their annual property tax bill from the county auditor and county treasurer. And another tax, we could call it a fee, but another tax at this point in time, I'm not sure the timing on this is the best. And then finally, we all know the first Tuesday in May, we're going to have an income tax on the levy. When you combine the property tax bill we're all going to be receiving in the next month, when you combine that with the fact that the You can drive around Athens now and see signs in the back of car and truck windows, sign the petition to do away with property taxes. Taxes are first and foremost on many people's minds. And I'm afraid that in this climate, it may make it increasingly difficult to pass that income tax. And I had not thought of what Mary said, but in terms of selling the idea of an income tax, this might be a very good way to do it. So the final question is, if we're going to do this, the $160,000 that we're currently spending lights on, what are we going to spend that $160,000 on? And I didn't have an answer. So I kind of lean with Member Wood here. I would like at the least in 2 weeks at our next committee meeting to see the year-end figures from the city auditor to see where we are. And at that point in time, maybe take this up for discussion and move forward with an appropriate course of action. Thank you.
Can I ask?
So
Treasurer?
briefly, I don't have the carryover number for you. You are correct, in 2024, you're talking about general, the income tax that came into the general fund.
Yes, sir.
And you're right, in 24, it was 10.5. Basically, we finished 2025 with $11,106,146. So that's a $573,396 increase over 2024, about 5.44%. You know, that's great. We needed that. And we're going to continue to need increases like that in the future. Because as we saw when we did the budgeting process, our medical, our personnel, and these are the two things that have really hit our general fund, they're going to increase more than 5.44% probably. So that's why we're talking about we're talking not just about the income tax levy, we're talking about when we sit down at the finance meeting, we're talking about every avenue we can think of, that how are we going to keep the general fund churning along, you know, at a level that meets all of our expenses. But that's your number, you know, like I say, we just finished this up pretty much today. I went down and was working on this. But that's your number for the end of the year, was basically 11.1.
So about $100,000 off. Not too bad.
You were pretty close.
Yeah, not too bad. But again, to your point, and your points are all well taken, we've talked about the income tax quite a bit, and I guess I can't emphasize enough that my fear is that another tax, no matter how big it is, in this case it's $30, but for some people $30 is make or break. I packed at the food pantry back in December up in Logan. We packed over 1,600 boxes in a day. And with reduction in SNAP benefits and all of that, every penny is becoming more crucial to many of the citizens in this town. So again, I'd like to see the carryover number, and I think in a couple of weeks we should be able to have that. And I think that would be appropriate time to take this back up. But that's what I've heard from the community and some thoughts that I have.
Can I ask the mayor, there's no huge rush on us to do this, so if we were to take some time, it's not, you're not going to turn off the streetlights. Yeah, well, that's good to know.
So, no, there isn't a rush, and if I may,
Sure.
also kind of make a comment, because I think this is a great conversation. This is how council works. And Ms. Abel, thank you for your comments on that, too. I appreciate hearing your words, which are important. There is something else that I'm going to explore, given that there are individuals, and I know that are living on a fixed income and it's razor thin. We do have what's called the NOPEC Energized Communities Grant, which we've been extremely creative with what we have used that for. It's about anywhere from $9,000 to $10,000, $11,000 a year that we receive from NOPEC. Most recently, we used it for what was referred to as the Voltage Program. I can't remember what the acronym stands for, but it's basically giving citizens the opportunity to dispose of their two-stroke carbon-emitting lawnmower, weed whacker, leaf blower, whatever, and transition over to electric yard implements. Successful program. One other thing that I'm going to look into by communicating this to NOPEC is would creating basically a grant program for qualifying individuals to offset that $2.50 or $30 a year and use NOPEC's Energized Communities Grant in that way, which would be kind of interesting given that the city's electric is coming from 100% renewable. That's one of the stipulations with using the energized communities, that you're doing something creative with renewable energy or things along those lines. But I'm going to find out. I'm going to see if that's an opportunity or a possibility. But again, I want to be on record as saying that this has been, as small as it's been a really interesting conversation. I think more to follow.
I just have one more thing to add, because I just don't feel like it was 100% mentioned, is just to keep in mind that this would be, if this was created, this would be another one of those proprietary funds, where we're not going to collect everybody's money and then say, oh, look at all the money we have left over, what can we do with that? It literally has to go to that. So, you know, the rates would be based on the absolute need per year as to what it costs. It's not something that we would be collecting extra money, you know, or raising the rates because we want to do something else. You know, sometimes that gets lost in the conversation, but just like your water, your trash bills, the rates would be based on the usage, that's it. You know, nothing more, nothing less. So.
Well, that raises a question. If the cost of the streetlights goes up, will this rate have to go up as well?
Good point.
Yeah, much like anything else,
Right.
it would have to support itself.
Member Swank.
Back to the mayor's thing. I'm going to Cleveland tomorrow. You want me to ask? I'm on the NOPEC board, and we have a meeting this week, so I can ask. I can come back with a bag of cash, too.
Be careful what you say.
Yeah, we'll retract that
Should we move
statement.
to strike?
Councilmember Swank, if you would, that'd be great.
Okay, I'll ask when I'm up there tomorrow.
So I think it's seeing any other council members, committee members? So it sounds like, from my sense, is that we have more to discuss at this, and maybe we table this for the agenda in 2 weeks' time and bring it back to discuss with those other numbers and perhaps even more information from NOPEC in 2 weeks. Are we agreed?
Agreed.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Isherwood. I'll just confirm with the clerk that we don't need to officially table. We will just have this back on our committee for 2 weeks, as Member Isherwood indicated, and we will adjourn City and Safety Services this evening at 7:57. And now all council members may return to the dais for the Committee of the Whole. This is the committee that discusses the issues that cut across topics, and tonight's focus is on the rules that council follows. These rules are on our city council website if you look on the bottom right-hand corner under quick links. But we have an opportunity for council members this evening to raise any questions or comments they have about the current rules as they exist for council to follow. And I'll do my best to recognize hands I see in the order that they are raised. Do we have any council members who would like to raise a question or comment about the rules? Member Swank.
As I alluded to last meeting, there was just one, and it's fairly simple. If anybody wants to follow along, you can go to city website and you can call up the rules. And the ones I'm going to refer to today are two very simple rules. Rule number 7 and rule number 8. So if you want to just take a second, maybe call that up, rules 7 and 8, and then I'll have a short handout here that's pretty easy. But rule number 7 is kind of an interesting one. Basically, what rule number 7 is, says the president of council shall call the regular session of council to session at the appointed time. And that's it. When you get to Rule 8 talks about the order of business for the meeting. So where this all came about is when we were going through orientation and President McCary was sending us out lots of information and referencing other communities, this, that, and the other. I started visiting those just out of curiosity to see what they do, and they're all over the board. But there were some commonalities in those other communities. And one of the commonalities was item number 1 on their agendas was rule number 7, call to order. So what I'm proposing today for your consideration is basically getting rid of rule number 7 and combining that one item in rule number 7 with rule number 8 so that we start off rule number 8 with a call to order. So let me pass these out to you and I'll be able to explain the other 2 things that I'm throwing out for your consideration. I'll take one of these and pass them down, please, sir. And for all the members of council. In looking at those other communities and other organizations, and I'm not only city councils, but the state house, school boards, any public elected body in the state of Ohio, many of them, the second on the item on their agenda was the Pledge of Allegiance. After that, it's necessary to establish a quorum before any business can be done. And after the quorum was established, then approve the agenda. The three items that are different from the current Rule 8 are shown in bold here, 1, 2, and 4. So the proposal would be, for your consideration tonight, start the meeting with a call to order by the president, as he or she deems appropriate, and that in Rule 5, that power is given to that office. Follow up with the Pledge of Allegiance. Then we establish the quorum so we can determine whether or not we can conduct business. We need at least 4 people for a regular session. And then approve the agenda. Clerk Walker, by law, the agenda has to be posted to the public by when? 3 days in advance?
Well, it's 24 hours.
24 hours, okay. And then, of course, you're not working on Saturday and Sunday.
Right.
But 24 hours in advance. So basically by 7 p.m. on Sunday. Clerk Walker gets that out to us on Thursday, sometimes Friday, so plenty of time. But you also know, those of you who've been on council, Beth and Jessica, for some time now, that sometimes at the very last moment we're handed something. And sometimes it's very routine, but sometimes it's like, oh boy, now what are we going to do? We're just finding out about this. By actually voting on approving the agenda, it gives us the opportunity at that point in time to look at the item that may have been presented to us and have a discussion whether or not we're prepared to handle it, whether or not we should handle it. It makes it a formal process. There'll be a motion to amend, second, discussion, and a vote. And that's how an agenda is approved. It also puts into place that this is how we're going to conduct the meeting that particular night. So the first thing is combining 7 and 8, putting it all into one. Pledge of Allegiance, self-explanatory, establish the quorum so we can do business, and then approve the agenda. The rest of the agenda from 5 down to 15 is what we currently do. So I throw that out for your consideration. It's not a major change or anything, but it's kind of tighten things up a little bit and add a little bit of formality to what we do to start off the meeting. Thank you, President McCary.
Do we have questions or comments in response to the proposal that Member Swink has shared, starting with Member Wood?
Yeah, a number of things. I think I'm curious to hear more about the approving agenda item. I very much agree that it's frequently a point that we feel a little flat-footed. I think that's something, if Solveig was here, she'd have a lot to say about it. That was always one of her big things. So I think that's great. As far as the pledge, I'm very against it, both for 3 reasons. One, article of faith. I'm a Quaker, so I don't do that, so I won't. 2, it feels performative. And 3, I'm uncomfortable with performing that in this current moment with this current administration. I think anything that feels like a fealty pledge, I strongly dislike, and so I firmly am against that.
Any other comments from you, Mr. Wood, at this time?
No.
I'll hear additional comments and questions in response to Member Swink's proposal before giving him the opportunity to clarify or add additional comment. Member Thomas.
I think I would echo a lot of what Michael says. The agenda approval, I think that makes sense, and I think we can work with that. I don't really have any objections to that, but I am with Member Wood on the pledge. I am not in favor of that. I'm not a Quaker, but everything else lines up with that. I am a very long time atheist, and I have no desire to introduce religion or loyalty pledges into local government at this point in our country's time. And I have felt this way since 8th grade, so I don't anticipate changing anytime soon.
Anything else at this time, Member Thomas?
No.
I'm looking for additional comments or questions in response to Member Swank's proposal. Member Isherwood.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think approving the agenda is a good idea to do, and I think you could certainly make things tighter, but eliminating Rule 7 and making it part of that. But I would agree on the Pledge of Allegiance as someone who's an immigrant to this country and got my citizenship about 3-4 years ago. I'm very proud to be an American citizen. But I was a long-time history teacher, and I can say the history of the Pledge of Allegiance is a strange and varied one. It is not one. The original version of the Pledge of Allegiance did not include any reference to religion in it. That came about in the 1950s, but it came out of an anti-immigrant sentiment. It was designed to ensure that the children of immigrants would see this country as, to indoctrinate in many ways. In no way am I against the idea of saying we are supportive of and proud to be Americans and proud to be Athenians. I have no problem with that. But the Pledge of Allegiance, I'm not entirely sure has a place here.
Any further comment from you at this time, Member Isherwood?
No.
All right. Any additional comments or questions in response to Member Swank's proposal from council members? Member Swank, would you like to add any comment or clarification based on the comments you've heard?
Yeah, I certainly respect all those comments, and like Member Isherwood, I was a public school history teacher too. One of the beauties of this is that, and many schools, and your father would bear this out, many schools who say the Pledge of Allegiance and other organizations, and by the way, our local Board of Education does it, and those of us who are members of the Central Committee of the Democratic Party, we say it to kick off that meeting every time, is that participation is not required. In the public school system, in those schools that say the Pledge of Allegiance, the Supreme Court has ruled that you cannot compel someone to participate in it. So it is an optional thing. If someone feels for, whether it's their personal beliefs, their religious beliefs, all of which I respect, that they do not have to participate in it. But that doesn't preclude a body from doing it, as many that I've mentioned, including our local Democratic Party. I've not attended the Republican Central Committee meeting, but I would bet that they do also. And I even think back to our most recent major dedication in this town, and that was to the Armory. And the Pledge of Allegiance was a part of that ceremony to kick that off. So, yeah, that certainly respect those opinions, but again, it is not a mandatory thing that an individual would need to participate in. Yes, Member Klopfelder.
I don't think I had a strong opinion about the Pledge of Allegiance until I heard 3 of our 7 city council members mention discomfort with it. And if there's anything that makes 3 out of 7 of us uncomfortable, then I'm against it.
Thank you, Member Klopfelder. Do we have any comments or questions on Member Swank's proposal at this time? Any further comments or questions? Yes, Member Wood.
Did you say, John?
No, you go ahead. You go first.
No, go ahead.
No, I didn't even. You signaled before I did. You go. I defer to you.
Wanted to let you get your first one.
That's all right. You go.
I think we've settled that part. I think my only follow-up question that I do think would be interesting on the agenda part is what happens if somebody objects or doesn't want to move forward with that. I mean, I think that's the sticking point. I'm very on board with the idea. Again, I think it's a good one because it has always been a thing that I felt we need more lead time on. But then what happens if somebody says no, right? Or somebody doesn't go for it? I think that's what the mechanics would be.
Yeah. Yes, Member Swank, would you respond to that?
So what my suggestion would be is that, because we will not vote on this tonight by our rules, rule number 3435, rule change after the first meeting of the year has to come before committee, which we're talking about now, and then it can be voted upon at a subsequent meeting. That's what Rule 3435 says. I can't remember which one of the two. My suggestion would be, because I've heard on 2 of the items a lot of support, and one of the items mixed support, is that if we were to vote on this next week, that we would vote on each one of these. so that disqualifying one or including two wouldn't necessarily deal with all three, so that we could vote to make call to order the first thing. There would be a vote. We could vote on the Pledge of Allegiance. There would be a vote, and then we could vote.
Sorry, I think you misunderstood. I mean, if somebody objects to an agenda item.
Okay. So I've covered two things. So let me address that one. So, is that one good? Everybody understand what I'm saying there? I'm seeing a lot of shit get. So if somebody objects to an agenda item, so someone comes up, we want to do this, the motion's made to add it, second, we have a discussion, it becomes a majority vote. If 4 out of the 7 people vote in favor of it, just like anything else, it would be added to the agenda. Now, later, by Robert's Rules of Order, later in the agenda, if someone would want to add an agenda item at that time, it takes a supermajority. Again, referring to Robert's Rules of Order. But at the beginning of the meeting, if we were to have an agenda item presented to us or someone brought one, that would be a simple motion, a second, discussion, and a vote with majority ruling to add it to the agenda. And those are all right from Robert's Rules of Order.
Thank you for that response to the question. We'll now move to Member Stazer.
Okay, so now I have a different question. I'm not going to go back to the other one. So I guess my question is, because I just started on doing this, and if we have the set agenda that gets posted, right, and then somebody brings up another one, is it typical that it just gets added, doesn't get added? How does that work?
The recent history has been that such items would be, as Member Swank indicated, there'd be a motion to amend the agenda, a second, and then a vote. And in most typical, in all cases I can think of recently, we've added it to the agenda.
Okay, so I guess that procedure's already in place.
Well, no, in the past, they were just given. Yeah, and I think Beth said.
Oh, so it wasn't
No, it wasn't formal. It was just given in the past. And as Member Wood said, often felt flat-footed, or maybe Beth said that, and the other one said a little unprepared. And I think that was pretty much a consensus, that those last-minute things kind of caught us off guard, and we had no say in whether or not we would take up the item.
Okay.
Member Gladfelder.
If I remember correctly, though, sometimes we were given those things because of pending deadlines for grant proposals or something that really was time sensitive. And yeah, it would have been much better for us to have gotten it earlier, but I remember there being some of those instances where I understood and I wanted to help it get passed.
And in the discussion, that would come out and we would vote, I would assume, in favor of it. It just kind of formalizes and tightens it up a little bit.
Okay.
But it also adds a procedure within which if you need to add something at the last minute, the administration or council president, they would know that they could definitely do that, and it would definitely be on the agenda to do it.
Yeah, good point.
Any other questions or comments right now? If not, my next step would be to invite any council members who wish to voluntarily, not required, share their thoughts on possible next steps. I would love to hear those. Member Wood.
I'm really glad that Alan brought these up. I think that it's a good thing to have more involvement and visibility. I'm really happy you did. I think, there's some other things that come to mind in process that I think would be good to tackle. I had a, shower fill out idea for how we could help citizens speak, go a little smoother, this kind of thing. I assume other people do as well. We kind of talked about this, and then we said we weren't going to talk about it today, I think. I thought we weren't going to talk about it today. But I think it'd be good to have a deeper threshing around rules and have people bring more. So I'm glad that you opened this up, and I would like to add more to it, or see if other people have other things they would like to add as well.
I appreciate you sharing that, Member Wood, because the Committee of the Whole does have the opportunity to meet again in 2 weeks to continue conversations about updates to the rules, and it would be appropriate for us to consult with the law director as far as if we want to do them all at once, amending the rules, or if we would like to take them as folks have proposed them. But do we have anyone who has a desire to have conversations about, for example, Member Wood shared, a topic other than the rules that we've discussed tonight, such as public participation? Yes, Member Sherwood?
Well, I do want to raise one, and it's one that I think I've talked with individual with a few different members of council, and it's one that I thought I had a strong view on, and it's one that I think we should talk about, and I'm curious to know what more experienced members of council think about this. And as I step into being a committee chair, it's one that I'm sort of curious to know what the best practice would be, and that is the idea that we would vote for things out of committee. So we have an agenda item for committee, and the general practice has been for years, and perhaps, I don't know, going back, that there is not necessarily need to be a formal vote. There's a lot of good reasons why it would make sense to do that, but I think there's also reasons why it could be problematic. So, for instance, you know, if we have an agenda item before the committee, that issue can go away by a small minority of the council. So you could have a situation where two members of a committee vote against it. Because my understanding in that scenario, the chair would not vote, because it's 4 members of a committee, so you'd have to have. So 2 members of a committee could kill an issue before it ever got to the full council, if that was an idea. That might be a good thing, but there's also a downside to that. So I also think about, there are ordinances, I think about some of the ordinances that we looked at tonight in my own committee, the salt one, but I think Member Swank raised an issue as well about that dramatic increase in costs. It's like something we should talk about, but it was also in many ways a perfunctory ordinance, because the amount is already, it's in the budget, and it is simply allowing permission for the city to spend that money. However, and there is a potential issue if we had 2 members of committee could kill that issue, and then the city doesn't buy salt, then we're in trouble. So there's a lot. I think there's a lot more nuance to that. I took a feather out of Member Swank's cap. I did a little research on other cities as well, and looked at this, and it's actually fairly common. The city councils, particularly small bodies like this, don't have that formal process, in part because, much like ourselves, we're a part-time council, we don't meet that often, we don't have a lot of time to deal with those issues. And so I think there was a few things worth, if we were to have a conversation about whether, and I noticed even tonight, some of the committees did have a vote, some of the committees didn't. And I think that's fine. I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, but I do think it means that if you're on one different committee, we do a vote, one committee we don't. It can often get confusing if people felt they had an opportunity to vote on an issue and then they didn't, and they didn't get an opportunity to express the view. I think you can hold back. There are pros to this. You would still get an opportunity at the full council if it moves forward without a vote. But I do think that there are things worth considering about this that are pros. So it would force council members to have to fully engage at committee level. You have to take a position. You have to say where you stand. I think it would also fully engage administration, other elected officials with the committee, because they would know they'd have to get full argument to the committee. We've seen it, and we saw it, you know, Member Swank, you mentioned it tonight. There were a lot of numbers that we could have had perhaps from the auditor tonight that would have made that conversation a lot clearer, but we weren't in a position as a committee to move forward with that. Administration would know that if they wanted a committee to really act on an issue, they would have to give us as much information as possible. And I take, perhaps as a chairperson, maybe I should have thought about asking for that information so we had that, but so I'll take that on board. I also think that, you know, the full council, so council members can demand more fully developed legislation before they vote on things. So I think there is an opportunity to improve what we do. I also think, you know, it's also important to note that just because you voted against something in committee doesn't mean it's a binding vote. You would have the opportunity, once it goes to full council, if new issues came up, you're not required to stick to that vote. So you have an opportunity to change your position. So I think there's a lot to this. I thought a couple of weeks ago I was very much the position this is something we absolutely should definitely do. We should create a formalized of that voting process. I was curious when I started to see it, other cities of a similar size don't do that. That sort of made me start to think, well, I wonder why that is. And I'm curious, again, I don't think the city will be massively damaged one way or another if we were to change this, but I do think we should have a consistent rule across the committees of what we do. And I'm definitely defer to the more experienced members of council and their views about what they think about this. And so
Thank you. Before I check on the next two hands, I'll share that the law director, as a result of some of the experiences we had procedurally at the end of the 2024 term, she did offer preliminary guidance that indicates she'd be supportive of us amending the rules for making it more explicitly permissible to have votes at the committee level. That is something that we can consider. For Member Thomas and Member Clodfelder, do either of your questions or comments respond to what Member Isherwood was just speaking to? Then we'll start with Member Thomas, and then we'll go to Member Clodfelder.
Thank you. First, I would say I just completely got flustered in my notes and forgot to vote things in my committee and realized when I sat out there that I just skipped that part, so I apologize. That is... I'd say it's a Monday, but we're always here on a Monday, so that's not really an excuse.
Not in 3 weeks.
Fair. I actually appreciate all of the points that Member Isherwood made and had a lot of thoughts on this, also. And I appreciate the research he did. And some of the points he made, I could see like where that would make it, where you would have the pros and the cons. So that was really helpful to hear. The take that I had on this was that we should formalize it because I just think when we have clarity, it makes everything a lot easier for all of us and everyone engaged with the council. I guess I had not considered whether or not a chair could or would vote. I think really only president of council doesn't vote on things.
That's true.
Yeah. So even like as pro tem, I would still vote if I was in that role at a moment. So when I looked at it and I thought about it, to me it made sense of looking towards next steps of formalizing it with, as it's only moving forward to a bigger discussion and it's not a binding vote, that a majority of 3-1 or a tie of 2-2 would automatically move it forward, and a majority nay would automatically remain it in committee. Mostly thinking if it's a tie or a majority of approval, it means that we're ready to go forward or that we need to hear a few more voices and that it would get a bigger discussion. And if the majority of us thought, no, it's not ready yet, then we would retain it in committee. And I actually thought at that point we should have a set policy as to when it would be brought back in committee, if it would automatically come back in the next meeting. And then also additionally adding things or something as to the effect of any item remaining in committee, the chair would give an update at the next meeting of the committee if it's not on the agenda, so that we have kind of a continuity of information coming on that. And my reasoning on a lot of this was, one, that at any time from full council, we can refer back to committee under Rule 22, and it just takes a simple majority vote. So we can always go back if we get to a point and we're finding that we're not moving forward on something. And, Member Isherwood is also correct in that a lot of it is just perfunctory, like we're going to buy, salt most years, we're going to do all these things. But there are some where, there's a little more information or back and forth that happens. And then I just really saw that a tie is an impasse for the committee, and at which point, getting some more voices involved would be the best next step, in my opinion. Yeah.
Thank you, Member Thomas. Moving on to Member Clodfelder.
Well, I too want to thank Member Isherwood for the research that he did, and Member Thomas for her comments. I guess I have a really different opinion, though. I have found that when I'm out in the public, citizens are most likely to talk to me after a committee meeting. And especially when we have, and I wouldn't want there to be a perception that we're deciding things prematurely before we get public input, because we're supposed to hear from people before we vote. Also, if the votes would be non-binding, then I'm not sure what good they would do. And it might actually sort of dissuade people from coming up and talking to us about issues if they think I am already in favor of something because I had to vote in committee, instead of having people not know what we think and being able to maybe more easily approach us after a committee meeting. And I just think it would have the potential to dissuade the public from approaching us or writing to us in a way that wouldn't necessarily either make things more efficient or more effective if they're non-binding votes, and if we would have to come up with a bunch of other rules in order to do that. I think there's a reason other communities don't do it.
If we have a point of clarification, I'll take that first, but otherwise, is that point of clarification, Member Wood? Okay.
So on the idea of non-binding, I mean, I think, and again, I want to make clear, I'm very comfortable if we make it a process we have to have votes. I'm not against that. I'm just like, as I did the research, I was trying to be like, oh, there are perhaps reasons why it hasn't happened, and that was surprising to me. But I think you have to have a position that members of council, as they learn things through 3 readings, could possibly change their minds. So if you vote for something in committee and say, yes, I'm supportive of this, you can't be bound to that, to vote against it or vote for it. And also, again, if it changes and you voted against it, you might go, actually, as the changes have happened, I'm now for this, and so you have to be able to change your vote for full council. I think that would be, if you are completely stuck, you no longer vote, then the council reduces to only the people who are supportive of it rather than people against it, and that I don't think we can do that.
I'm seeking questions and comments about the discussion point on voting in committee. Member Swank.
I guess I look at it a little differently. The vote in committee, in my opinion, is not a vote in favor or against. It's a vote to advance the legislation.
Yeah.
That's all it is.
Agreed.
It's a vote to advance the legislation to the entire body. And going back to one of the topics tonight, the streetlight thing, because in my opinion, I did not have enough information financially to feel comfortable putting it up for first reading. I wasn't in favor of advancing the legislation. By no means have I taken a position one way or another as whether I'm for it or against it. I was sharing some concerns I had. But to me, the vote is to advance the legislation, not that I'm for it or against it.
Okay.
In terms of the $240,000, this is very much on that. My big concern in that jump of 26% goes back to my yearbook days, when we would have district bids in the Chicago area and the district would say, here is our estimate.
Yeah.
The people bidding were in a contest of who could get closest to that estimate and still be the lowest bidder.
Our estimates are going to be $240,000.
So if we put out $240,000, $237, $238, and that comes from my background of, $1 million year, believe it or not, $1 million district yearbook bids. Again, I wasn't against the 240, but I wanted more information. So that's my point to Paul's point, which I think is a good one, sir. It's not a matter of being for or against the legislation at that point in time, but whether or not we should advance it to the full body.
Thank you for that point of clarification, Member Swank. Member Wood.
Yeah, something else important has come up today, in that Alan's highlighted that possibly members won't be able to speak in the committee phase anymore. If that's true, and to our point earlier, members choose to vote against it, we will never hear from Beth about what she had to say. And so I think that's a pretty big strike against that idea. Because if so, then 3 out of 4 of us will never get to have an opinion, voice an opinion to the public, etc., because of a committee vote.
At first reading.
And then to Jessica's idea of making it a supermajority, I think that we effectively can do that by making it a tabling thing if 3 people are against it. So if you just make it so it would die if 3 people are against it, you can effectively do that by tabling it. So I feel like just keeping it on the sort of it automatically moves forward phase unless it's tabled by supermajority, that to me makes most sense.
Thank you, Member Wood. Do we have any further questions or comments on the topic of voting in committee? Yes, Member Isherwood.
I would say, I think to Member Klopfelter's point, if we were to go down this path, I think we would have to add a series of complicated rules to make sure that things along the line that, I agree with Member Wood as well, that issue that we now know that if you're not on that committee, you can't speak to an issue. That changes some of the thinking about this, because as he said quite rightly, you might have very strong, you're not on that committee, but you might have strong feelings about it. You might have information that a member of the community has given you, and you haven't had an opportunity to speak to that, I think. And so, but I do think we would have to have rules about, like, for instance, if a committee votes no against it, it's 3-2, this is the issue, but how many times can it be brought back? Is it just going to appear on the agenda again and again and again? Or, is that at the behest of the chair or the president or the clerk? Who decides how often an issue can come back? I mean, I think we just have to, there are nuances if we add this. And again, not against us doing it. I think there are reasons to do it. And I think you can do it and make it effective. But I think we should take some time to think about what those rules should exactly be and think about how they would play out.
Thank you, Member Sherwood. Member Swank, let me check first. Do we have any other questions or comments on the topic of voting in committee? I see only Member Swank, so we'll make that the last one for this particular topic. Member Swank.
Over the last 30 years, the committee structure has evolved again and again and again. And if you read in any literature, including Robert's Rules of Orders on committees, the chair of the committee has great latitude as to how that committee operates. We are 4 separate committees. Paul, you are chair of one. Jessica is chair of one. Beth is chair of one. I am chair of one. Not too many years ago, we had 7 committees on council, and they met once a month. Once a month. Some would meet on the second, some would meet on the 4th. Wow. Yeah, this evolved over time. In fact, in some communities, if you're doing your research, you will see that transportation may meet Tuesday at 2 o'clock.
When
Finance
I
may
could
meet
not attend.
finance may meet Thursday at 5. You're meeting another time and I'm meeting time, and each of those committees are basically, they run at the discretion of the chair, and hopefully the chair does it in a responsible way. The other part of that is, had we not had committee of the whole tonight, Micah doesn't have to be here. He has no role in committee meetings. Has nothing to do with Micah, but he has no role. Where's this all coming from? This is coming from our parliamentarian, which we appointed. So when we say the law director, I think we have to be careful. She's not offering a legal opinion on this. She's offering a parliamentary perspective, which we have appointed her to do. So I think this is, and the reason I brought up Rule 7 and 8 tonight, I thought that was an easy one, and I thought that was the only one we were going to do. My suggestion would be twofold. Number one, I said this earlier. Next week, let's vote individually on call to order, pledge allegiance, and approve agenda so we can get 7 and 8 taken care of. And then maybe systematically over the course of the next few months, we take on a rule topic that everybody's aware of what it's going to be before we get here and discuss that. Because I think to go through multiple rules, we're already going on, I didn't write the time down here, yeah, 57. We're already going on 35 minutes on this one, and we could be here all night in respect for people's time. So that would be my 2 suggestions. One, let's next week look at this Rule 8, individual votes on 1, 2, and 4. And based on our conversations today, try to identify what would be the next rule we would like to take on as a committee of the whole to discuss.
All right, I am going to invite, not require, once again, any council members who would like to share their thoughts on next steps, whether that be to follow up on the recommendations Member Swank has just made, which would be for our Tuesday regular session a week from tomorrow, because we have MLK Day on Monday, or to resume the topic more generally at our next Committee of the Whole meeting, which would be 2 weeks from now. So this is not a requirement to let me know your preference, but if anyone would like to volunteer their thoughts on next steps, I will hear that now. Member Thomas.
I think I'm good with those next steps. Continue to take some time on some others and going through them, but moving to these immediate ones that have been suggested tonight.
our law director, who is also our parliamentarian, watches our committee meetings and will possibly have some feedback for us about the most efficient and appropriate way for us to do this. So I will follow up with council members about that plan. But right now, unless I hear from the parliamentarian otherwise, we'll move forward with Member Swank's recommendation to see this first topic regarding Rules 7 and 8 on the agenda for our next meeting, which will be a week from tomorrow, Tuesday, January 20th. Did I get that right? All right. All right. Any, oh, yes.
Mary, I think.
Okay. For this topic on the committee for council rules, we weren't planning on doing public input for this topic, but I want to make an exception for any public input that might. Yes, yes, Mary Abel, please let us know what's on your mind.
Thank you so much, and thank you for Robert's Rules and going through that, because I'm somewhat of a Robert's Rules nerd, so. I would ask that you might please take a look at Rule 14. I've been coming to council meetings for several years, as you all know, and the public speaks. And one of the things that the public finds a little frustrating is that when they come to council, that sometimes they ask a question and they get no answers because of what it says on Rule 14, and that there's no debate. I agree there should not be any debate. But before other legislative committees, oftentimes when a member of the public comes and they give their comment and they ask questions, the chairperson of that committee or the president often can answer those questions rather than just maybe sit and listen and not give any information back. And I think it should be very clear, there have been people who have come before council and they've been just wanting to ask a question. They haven't been rude, they haven't been belligerent, they're just trying to get something answered. And also it gives council an opportunity to ask that person questions because you may need some information for clarification. So I would just ask you, as one of the members of the public sitting out here, if you could just maybe think about that rule and maybe how you might want to address it. I think there are members of the public who would really appreciate your consideration of that. So thank you.
Thank you, Mary Abel. And indeed, we would like to acknowledge that we've had at least one council member express interest in talking about rules, Rule 14 in particular, related to the public speaking. So it was appropriate for us to hear a comment from the public on that particular rule. Before we move on, do we have anyone else on council who would like to raise a rule at this time that they want to be discussed down the road? Yes, Member Swink.
I would combine 14 and 28. They're essentially two versions of the same thing.
So we have a preliminary list of topics to share with our law director and parliamentarian, and that will likely become something that we revisit during committee of the whole meetings, but we will seek her advice on the proper scheduling. And I do assume that ultimately we would be doing all the rules amended on it in single ordinance as opposed to a bunch of them, but we'll check with the law director and the clerk to see what the best procedure is for that. Before we wrap up committee of the whole for the evening, do we have any final comments or questions?
Just one on that issue that Member Smith, you're right, and one of the issues is often, I think, there were a number of public hearings last year, and I was a member of the audience for a number of them, and I think the frustration that Mary raises, and I understand why there can't be debate, but there was frustration that there was no ability of anyone on council at times to issue points of clarification on issues. And I don't know, maybe members of council were happy that they didn't have to do that. Maybe that was a more comfortable position to take. But I think there were a lot of points raised and questions asked at times that people didn't feel they got information back, and they left frustrated because there were people up here had that information, but because of the rules couldn't speak to those issues. And So I think there's, you know, you want to maintain decorum, but I do think that those are all much of a same thing at public hearings too is worth. And there's nothing in the rules here about public hearings that says that can happen. That could be a parliamentarian thing, I don't know, but it's in Rule 3 on public hearings, it doesn't say that people can't. So I don't know, something worth thinking about as well.
Absolutely. Any final comments or questions on the topic of rules for the Committee of Whole this evening? All right, seeing none, I'll announce Committee of the Whole concluded at 8:39 p.m., and I believe we're done for the evening. Thank you.